And as we reflect, we pray, Lord, thank you for all the joy and wonder in life. When there are struggles, please help us transform those challenges into opportunities for growth. Shine your light so that we may be illuminated to become the person you are calling us to be. Inspire us to develop the gifts and talents you have given us for the benefit and the service of those that you have placed in our lives. May each of us become a blessing for others. Amen. Over to you, Dr. Campbell.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And welcome again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being here as we engage in our discussion this afternoon. Our discussion this afternoon is going to be focusing on, as we said, an introduction to racism and to Black racism, from awareness to action. We've been talking about a lot of this, a lot lately. But what I do, it's kind of strange, but what I do realize is that we still need the awareness. It's maybe surprising to some of us who have been so close to the work, or we have invested in our own learning, that there are so many people who are unaware. And there's no excuse. They're unaware for many reasons. And for many people, they're unaware because they have not engaged. They have not engaged. And even like this, there's 40 of us in the room. There's many reasons why other persons are not here. And there are other persons who will be listening to the video later on. But then let's be also honest about the fact that there may be some of us who will say to ourselves, I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in this topic. And so you keep not being interested. You keep not being aware. You keep not engaging. And so we want to move from that place of being aware to action. And then there are another set of us who are very much aware, but we are nervous about how do I act? What do I do? I was at a talk this week, and on Tuesday, as a matter of fact, and it was really, really a good energy in the room, because from the get-go, people understood that the conversations are great. The workshops are amazing. The panel discussions are enlightening and fruitful, and whatever we are doing to get us aware is necessary and is integral. But something that came up very strong was the action, and I think I want to underline that as before we get into it, is that I want us to understand that action looks different for different people. So there's two kind of actions we are talking about as we start. The first action is the action that you're going to use to engage in your own learning. The action that you're using to grow. The action you're using to be more aware. The action you're using to be informed. The action you're using to be updated and educated. That's one action. And then there's a next action. Now that I get all of this information, what do I do with it? How do I execute some form of allyship? How do I execute some form of activism? How do I execute educational change? How do I execute decolonizing? Something just came to my mind, and I want to say this. I think a lot of us are scared, I'm going to use that word, with all the terminologies we're using. You hear anti-Black racism, then you hear somebody say BIPOC, and then you hear somebody says we shouldn't use the word BIPOC, and then you hear somebody say, well, we need to be decolonizing, and don't even tell me you're an ally anymore. I want you to be an accomplice. I want you to be a co-conspirator. And what is happening, and I'm listening to it out there, L'Oreal, what is happening is that people are getting so caught up in a word, in the language, in the terminology, which is important. Let me make clear, it is important. But we are so caught up in trying to say the right word, we're in a freeze mode about the action. I remember the first time somebody said to me, a group of principals said to me, some of us did not celebrate Black History Month because we don't want to make a mistake. I was very thrown off by that. I don't celebrate Black History Month because we don't want to make a mistake. The truth is, they saw a lot of mistakes being made. So they say, well, I don't want to make a mistake, so let me not do anything. You see, inaction, when it comes to racism and anti-Black racism, inaction is not an action. So let's get back to the two things again we talk about at beginning. Why we need to invest in the learning so we can act. And the truth is, if all those persons who had said that to me were more in tune and engaged in their learning, they would have acted. And I maybe can report good news that a lot of those people, because it's happened last year, it's over a year that happened, and I know many of those persons, they have engaged in good learning. And many of them are already planning for Black History Month for next year already, because now that they have the learning. So I wanted to connect the awareness. I wanted to be intentional in connecting the term awareness to the term action. That's why I took the time to do that. I wanted for us to connect. So as you look at my diagram, look at the diagram there. Let us take to the diagram. This is very, very important. And really, really take a picture of this for your own learning. So we want us to become, well, I'm not racist. We want us to become anti-racist. We want us to do more. We want us to be invested. You have heard all the different speakers out there and millions of videos and movies and shows and stuff that people are talking about. But what happened is that it's a range. It's a growth. And the truth is we are all at different places and spaces. We're all at different places and spaces. I had a conversation today, and I'm going to share it with two professors. And we're talking about an article that, two of us wrote that is coming out in September, and three of us were engaged in a conversation about pedagogies of pain and suffering. And we had a conversation about why is it that so many of us racialized persons, indigenous people, different people, do not share our stories of pain. There are many reasons, and you'd be surprised the number of reasons. And why some persons are silent. Some persons are silent because they have not yet gotten the words. Some persons are silent because they are still hurting. Some persons are silent because they don't want to identify with the trauma. There are many reasons. And that's why I like the circles here, because I want you to decide where you are. That's nothing to share with me. That's nothing to share with your superintendent. That's nothing to share with your learning coordinator or your director. That is something you share with yourself. But we have to trust you. Here comes a trick, Sherry. We have to trust you that when you know where you are, then you do something about it. So if I sit here tonight and you say, you don't have time, but in your heart you said, you know what, Andrew? I really have been one of those that avoid the hard conversations. I like to go to the workshop that are comfortable. I see the topics. I like when you talk about deficit thinking. I'm good with the cultural competency. Oh, I like your workshop on diversity and inclusion. But when we get into the racism and the anti-Black racism and the certain things, I just be uncomfortable. If you are there, you have to figure out that you are in a fear zone. And you have to figure out, how do I move? See, that's why I want to talk to you in a different way than I normally do this workshop. How do I move from the fear zone to the learning zone? To the learning zone, to be engaged, to sit up straight and lean in and understand. And here I'm going to go back to the learning again. The other day, when we heard about, let me stop here for a minute. The other day when we heard about 215, I've used the example many times, but I want to use it again. I think I have been doing a pretty good, steady job at my own growth in understanding Indigenous and the issues surrounding Indigenous people, the history, the issues, truth and reconciliation, all that kind of stuff. But as I heard that news, and I felt all the feeling I felt, Sherry, I felt all the feelings. And that weekend I really was down. I remember the Monday, I changed my background to an orange background, Sherry. I wore this African cape that I got that is orange, it's beautiful. I wore that in tribute. The school boards and different institutions, all day I watched the news, my TV's right there, and I heard 215 minutes of silence, 215 seconds of silence, 250, and it's just a lot of good stuff. Notice my choice of word, good stuff. but they are symbolism stuff and they are performative, and nothing is wrong with symbolism. I keep on saying that to us. We need those symbols. When we do the sign of the cross, there's many ways we do symbols and things that make it as important to us and remind us who we are. But I said to myself, if all I did that day was to change my screen, wear orange cape, and observe 215 seconds of silence, then I was like, well, let me back to live my best life again and forget it. I would have done nothing. I would have done nothing. So I keep asking myself, how will I act? One of the things that I did was to continue with my learning. I think that from that weekend until now, I think I've engaged in 3 more videos that have been created by Indigenous people. I have a conversation with an Indigenous professor who I have good relationship with. So I am doing my growing, and then comes my action. So what am I, until I think about what are the things that I'm doing to act. Now we hear about racism again, anti-Muslim. We see the murder. Are we going to lay flowers and then we do nothing? What can we do? Then anti-Asian racism. What can we do? We have to realize as educators that we are influencers of change. And what I want you to realize is that we cannot stay in the fear zone. We have to move in the learning zone and the growth zone. Look at the growth zone. I identify how I love this one, unknowingly benefit from racism. You identify those things. You come to the reality of many things. I find it hard when teachers are struggling to find out what's going on in their school board, when the school board has put out many statements about racism. So I want us to get to that place. So I wanted to leave that as our ground. So as we look this afternoon, we're talking about power, privilege, and influence. Feeling helpless and inadequate are common feelings. I want to acknowledge that these are common feelings, like, what can I do? Oh my God, what can I do? But when we have to sit and think, there's many ways I can disrupt. Your stories you share in school, the news you share, how are you sharing this conversation? And I keep on telling people, I don't need you to go downtown and tie yourself to the building and lay down in the street. Those things are good. I have done them. They work. But one of my proudest moments, my proudest moment right now has been the 2 courses that I created at the University of Toronto for Black students. One is about urban education and pedagogy, really focusing on issues to deal with anti-Black racism, and any other issue in urban poverty, socioeconomic status, deficit thinking, immigrant, giftedness, all the kind of stuff to deal with inner city and urban and those kind of stuff. And then the next course is going to be offered come September, and it's an affinity space course for Black educators, Black teachers in training, that talks about identity and pedagogy. Giving them the tools, because when you go to the university, all you can hear is, well, we don't have enough course to learn this. We're not learning. So I say, let me disrupt. And I disrupt by creating 2 courses. But remember, I couldn't do that by myself. So think about my supervisors. Think about my associate chair. My associate chair who work with me with the product. She's white. She spoke to me, we talked, we connected, the emails are sent back and forth. She is a part of the work. She is a part of that. So I want you to think, what tools do you already have to bring about the change? What tools? I remember one of the biggest conversations we had, this was last year, not this year, last year, when many teachers had an aha moment about the books they were using in language. I will never forget. There are teachers who genuinely said, I didn't know we could change the book. I thought this book was standard. And somebody says, well, no. 10 years ago, the language teacher decided we're going to use these books, and we just kept using them. And persons were like, I don't believe it. And people start to search and realize that the curriculum didn't suggest a mandatory book. it suggests a type of book. You and I, Sherry, is the person who chose those books. And we have made those books the only books. And so we have to know how to bring about change, how to disrupt some of those things in a good way, not in a bad way. The word disrupt doesn't mean bad all the time. So what we want to do is to look at these kind of things about systematic racism. So here's a big one. I use this for a reason because this shows you the level of pretense that happens. You know, people are still arguing that we are not as bad as America and Canada don't have this and Canada don't have that, and we go on and back and forth with those things. And let me get into something right now. So, history of anti-Black racism. Let's get into that quickly. I want to make sure I underline all of these points in our conversation. In our workshop, we do not get to underline them as much. I want to do this in this conversation. The Stephen Lewis Report 1992 first named anti-Black racism as a concern. It named it as a concern. Other racialized groups, we call them Black, Indigenous people of color, impacted by systematic discrimination in Ontario. However, Black community, vulnerable and acutely disadvantaged. Canada has its own long history of slavery and segregation. Those are the truths we have to come to grips with and understand. More and more we are seeing movies being created. There's something we like to do. We like to talk about Harriet Tubman because we like to start. When I came to Canada 2008, my first conversation, we started the story with Harriet Tubman. And so Canada became this place where people ran away from for freedom because the South was bad, but Canada in the North was amazing. But we don't tell the story, the entire story. We like to talk about Viola Desmond. We don't tell the entire story. We like to talk about Martin Luther, but we refuse to say he was assassinated. We like to tell the good stories. We have to tell all the stories. All the stories. And I'm going to put in a little thing right here. People always wonder why people are so angry at Black History Month when we talk about slavery. The reason is we don't talk about anything else. And when we do talk about it, we go to deficit. So I always say to people, slavery is not a topic that should not be discussed. Let me make that very clear. The topic of slavery is a part of our story, and it's a part of the disruption of our story. People frame it different way. Slavery is not our story. Slavery is a disruption of our story. I like that one. But the truth is, it's a part of the story to be told. But here comes the problem. The problem arises when every February, we decide to tell the slavery story. And so there's no other story except slavery. There's no other story about the amazing things that Black people have done. There's no other story. And that is why people say, why you always go to deficit. But if you have a course, so we're talking about Black history. If you write and if the curriculum develop and is changed, like people have been begging and forcing and fighting for, then we will tell the entire story. And the story, guess what, would not start on the slave ship, but the story starts from in Africa. I was watching a show on TV. Some of you may have been watching it on Netflix. It's called High on the Hog. Everybody been talking about it, High on the Hog. It's about food, but it's about Black food in America, or food influence America. And they're going back to the history and the roots. And when they go to places like Togo and Benin and Senegal and Ghana, you're seeing things that happened way before. We are seeing things that many of us in the Caribbean are going, we do that. Our great-grandmother did that, but nobody did it again. And you're understanding what comes from our ancestors. And so I want you to understand a part of the disruption. Yes, Katie, thank you for that. A great piece of show. A part of the disruption is telling the story, and telling the story in ways that are profitable, and ways that are significant, and ways that are impactful. So these are documented. Next we want to move on to quickly is what is anti-Black racism. So we have racism. Remember, anti-Black racism is just one part. We have seen indigenous, the racism. We have seen the anti-Muslim. We have seen anti-Asian. We have seen racism itself, racial prejudice, stereotype, and discrimination, which is directed towards people of African descent. This is an anti-Black racism. But if you take out the second part, it's racial prejudice, stereotype, and discrimination, which is directed towards certain people. And so let us ask ourselves a question right now. How does racism or anti-Black racism impact my community? Let's jump in the chat box and take a minute. Let's take 1 minute and just do a couple of that. How does racism or anti-Black racism impact my community? Go in the chat box for me, everybody, and share whatever you want to share there. How does this impact my community? Think about your community and ask yourself, how does this impact my community? Ask yourself that. How does this impact my community? Divides us. Absolutely. Creates differences. Yep. Feeling of isolation, increased mental health concerns. People become afraid when they pass a group of Black people on the streets. That's a big one, Angela. You'd be surprised. A big, big one about fear. About fear. Pushes people to the fringes, Mark. Thank you for that. Absolutely. And this is something you have to understand. When you are pushed to the fringes, you are not going to get the benefits because you are not a part of the main. When you're pushed to the fringes, isolation and feeling of unsafe, incorrect perceptions, ignored. I love how you said this, Christine. It's an underground wound that is ignored. I love how you phrase that. Thank you, because I'm going to tell you this. It's still a wound that many people are hurting from. You know, when you watch the show like High on the Hog, there are many people talk about how emotional they were. The streaming in high school, the dispossessed students to different pathway and choices. Thank you for that, Sherry. And when I watched the show, something I've always been saying was very clear in the show, is that there are people walking up and down among us right now who are still benefiting from the legacy of slavery. Their parents and their grandparents' riches, they're benefiting from that. So it's hard for us to understand when people talk about anti-Black racism and disruption and Black people are still feeling and indigenous people are still hurting. It's because the people are still living and benefiting from somebody else's trauma. We talk a lot about truth and reconciliation. We talk a lot about that. But I want you to realize that document, that Truth and Reconciliation document, I have not heard a discussion on that document in a long time, except, of course, when I teach or in my classes. And then we are 215, and the document is being shared by everybody. And I said, are we going to open the document actually and look and see what is in it and see what can we do better? So we have to be intentional about that. So let us get into this. I want to share something with you. I want to share this with you. This is from the Stephen Lewis report. And I want you to read with me what it says here. First, what we are dealing with at root and fundamentally is anti-Black racism. While it is obviously true, I love how he frames this, that every visible minority community experiences the indignities and wounds of systematic discrimination throughout Southern Ontario, it is the Black community which is the focus. You know, when I hear people say Black Lives Matter, and somebody jumps in and say, well, all lives matter. I can tell you this, all lives matter. That's for the recording. We know that. Nobody never said it didn't matter. What we're saying is that, as we said in the report here, it is the Black lives that are under attack. It is the Blacks who are being shot. It is a Black youth that is unemployed in excessive numbers. It is a Black students who are being inappropriately streamed in school. It is Black kids who are disproportionately dropping out. It is housing communities with large concentrations of Black residents where the sense of vulnerability and disadvantage is most acute. It is Black employees, professional and non-professional, on whom the doors of upward equity slam shut. Just as a soothing balm of multiculturalism cannot mask racism, so racism cannot mask its primary target. I want you to understand how powerful that statement is. That's from the Stephen Lewis report, and I could give you a copy of it later on when we are done. I have a copy, can just share with everybody so you take a read. So I want us to understand when we have these conversations, we have to be honest about these conversations. We have to be honest about this conversation. What is it that we're talking about? So let's get into about two quick video. Just a little clip here, but about 2 minutes quick clip, and then we're going to move on. Just want to show you something. So let's take the first one right now. Let's take the first one. Give me a minute. Sorry. Okay, I have to stop this. Give me 1 minute. All right, we're ready.
Anger is spreading in Philadelphia and across the country over an incident at a Starbucks last Thursday. A manager calling police asking that 2 Black men be removed from the store for trespassing. The men had asked to use the restroom, but were told it was for customers only. Then they sat at a table waiting for a friend to arrive, but didn't make a purchase. The scene caught on camera by other customers.
What did they get called for? Because there are 2 Black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes, well, what did they do? What did they do? Did someone tell me what they did?
They didn't do anything. I saw the entire thing.
What did they do?
And the woman says...
The 2 men arrested and handcuffed. They weren't charged and eventually were released. Joining me now is Melissa DePino, an eyewitness. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. You were in that Starbucks when these men were arrested?
I was in the Starbucks.
And tweeted out this video. So tell us what you saw leading up to this video.
Well, you know, I really just noticed something was happening when I saw 2 police officers come into the Starbucks and go over and talk to the men, and then a couple more officers came in, and then a couple more, and I think there were 6 or 8 of them. And sometime during that time, their friend, who you can see in the video, showed up. That's who they were meeting. And we were all just wondering, you know, why are all these policemen here? Why are they trying to make these men leave? They were just sitting there like everyone else. And, you know, we all sort of standing up and, you know, sort of talking to the people behind the counter and to the police officers and asking what was happening. And then they put them in handcuffs and took them out.
And they were, when the police arrived, I mean, how did the other customers react? Because they weren't, there was no yelling, nothing, right? They were pretty calm.
There was no yelling, there was no aggression. I mean, people, they were sitting there like anybody else would be sitting in a Starbucks at any time. And when the police officers were talking to them, there were no raised voices. I was sitting really close by, and you know, I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying because they were talking in a regular tone. So no, there was no disturbance.
Okay, so we stop there. So what I want to do next, what I want to share with you next, let's get back into our conversation. And what I want to share with you next is these questions. So I want us to take a minute to look at these questions. And I want us to ask ourselves, as I'm going to share, give me a minute, the questions. I want us to ask ourselves, as we're having the discussion, let us ask ourselves some questions. Let us a minute ask ourselves some questions. What did you see? What did you think happened? Would this have happened to you? To me? Why not? Think of all, and if you can remember one of those news, you can type it in the box. Think of all these issues that we see happening. The last one we see the other day was the judge. Anybody remember that one? The black judge who was arrested? Anybody remember that one? just the other day, the black judge mistaken. A judge, an old judge, mistaken. I could tell you my own story happening to me at the bank when I went for my first mortgage, how I was spoken to as if I was coming there to steal something. It was just ridiculous. But you have to understand, there is something that says to people, that says to persons, you know, I don't see you with the same value. I don't see you as my equal. I don't see you. So when I see you, I think you're doing something wrong. Let me give an example. A teacher the other day said something very powerful. She said she struggled with something. She said she struggled with something. She said, she teaches at high school. And she said, Dr. Campbell, it is so regular that when us as teachers, thank you for sharing that, Prince. Thank you for sharing, Prince. And anybody else have any of those episodes and other incidents, you can please share in the chat so all of us can get to that place so we see and we understand what is happening around them. And she said, I'm struggling with something, Dr. Campbell. She said, in my school, in the high school, she teaches at high school, she said, we walk past 6 or 7, white students together. She said, it's a norm. We'll say, what you guys are doing? We laugh, they're just, playing around, they're goofing around, they're doing those things. She said, that's our language. She said, once we're approaching 5 or 6 black boys, it's a different language. She said, even in a pleasant way, we will say, I hope you're all behaving yourself, or I hope you're doing the right thing. Or if a laugh or outburst comes out, she said, what is the problem? I want you to understand how we approach many of our students. And the students have said that to us. The students have said that to us in many, many, many ways. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing. In many, many ways, the students have been saying to us, this is what happens to me. This is what has happened to me. This is how I feel. This is how you see me. The students have been saying that to us a lot. I'm going to show you another example in a minute. So let's move on to let's move on to another video, because I was in a meeting once, and when this video was shown, somebody said to me and corrected me, we need to be careful how we use American examples. Literally, somebody said that to me. Be careful how we use American examples to talk about what's happening in Canada. And so immediately I stopped and I shared another video, which I'm going to share with you right now. So let's take another video, okay?
This is from Saturday at a semi-pro hockey game in Saint-Jérôme near Montreal. Fans yelling racist slurs at Jonathan DR.ABC, who is black, one even leaning over the side of the penalty box to taunt him. And it didn't stop there. Fans turned on DR.AC's father and girlfriend who were in the stands, insulting and threatening them as well. Our Alison Northcott now with the story behind the video and the outrage it sparked.
I had to put my jersey over my face because I had teardrops,
Jonathan DR.ABC says he's faced racism before, but nothing like this.
He started yelling racist stuff at my parents and my sister and all that, and myself. Good old Negro and all that, the baboons, like a bunch of stuff that was said.
The insults, he says, came from a handful of spectators and were so bad he and his family left the arena before the game was over.
Well, my dad was told to go back home, that he had no business in his country and all the places, stuff like that. People were like touching his hair, they were making fun of him. My sister was scared, my girlfriend was scared.
He says referees and security guards did nothing to protect them. DR.AC's league, the Ligue Nord-Américaine de Hockey, is notorious for rough play and rowdy crowds. But DR.AC's coach says even by that standard, this goes too far.
In 2019, it's something that, we shouldn't see anymore, and I think it's disgusting.
All right, so let's stop there. So what I want to show you is see the incident, see what happened right here in Canada. But then the news said the referee and whoever did nothing. This is the issue we're having in our schools and in our spaces, that many people are not acting on it. We are doing nothing. I have a teacher said to me many times, what do I do? What can I do? And sometimes I think people feel like you're being asked or you're being forced to go to school and to make a fuss in the staff room and cause a fight. Nobody's saying that. We're talking to you about how do you speak up? How do you speak up? How do you speak up? And that is an important thing we want to make sure we underline when we have a conversation like this, right? How do we speak up? So we saw that incident. So now we're going to go back and continue talking about systematic racism. Now, I love this quote, and it's from Ontario's 3-year anti-racism strategic plan. I love this quote. And it says, systematic racism occurs when an institution or set of institutions working together creates or maintains racial inequity. Think about that. Create or maintains racial inequity. Ask yourself who is being hired. Ask yourself who sits on the board. We have normalized institutions that serve a large racialized population, and yet still everybody in leadership is white. That has been normalized. We have to know how to normalize diverse boards, normalize diverse panels, normalize diverse committees, normalize diverse leadership. This must be a normal thing. Every time we see it, it's strange. I'm sure you realize the number of Black women, especially, who are promoted as educational directors lately, and everyone is a front news item because it's not normal. It's not normalized. I'm going to surprise you. I am still the first Black professors for students right now in 2021. In 2021, I am teaching a course where I have students in child development, the masters in child development, and I have some Black students in the class, and they're saying, Dr. Campbell, you are our first Black professor in our undergrad, in our bachelor's, in our master's. And then there's a ton of research out there that talks about systematic and racism within academia. I want you to understand it is natural for students to think I am not qualified enough to teach their class. That's a natural thing that happens in our systematic racist institutions. The Black person comes in to teach, the Indigenous person comes in to teach. The racialized person comes in to teach. Many times it's a woman coming to teach. And it looks as if they need something else. They are lacking. Because what we have not done is normalize inclusion. And I think what we need to be doing in our schools is working on things to be normalized. It shouldn't be a surprise to see a Black principal. It shouldn't be a surprise to see the Black superintendent. Those things should not be a surprise. But it is. And in many schools, they still have no examples. And so you imagine a school where a child gets to see somebody that looks like them, and that person is only in deficit. So the only Black person they know in their circle, in their work environment, in their school is the janitor or the bus driver. And this is a common thing. So how do they get to aspire what they'll never see? And that is why we're talking about representation. That's why the big conversation, I'll get into that in a minute, the big conversation about representation. So you have seen this before. You have seen this many times, and you continue seeing it. Why do I talk about this so often? Because it is us. I think, I'm feeling very proud. I'm going to tell you why I'm feeling so very proud. I have always believed that the work in anti-Black racism starts with individuals. The work that in disrupting marginalized community, the work in holding high expectation, the work in disrupting deficit, the work in breaking down Islamophobia and homophobia and ageism and sexism and genderized curriculum. The work in all of this begins with us. But when I went into the institutions, I wasn't hearing that a lot. I was hearing, let's get a framework. Let's get a diversity equity plan. Let's get, and I can tell you, what you got was a tons of people with good documentation. And documentation is good. And I've known organization with the best framework. I have been blessed to have privy to so much great information, organization with amazing framework. And they come to me and they say, Dr. Campbell, we have a framework. It's amazing. We have a strategic plan for our equity. If you see what we have embedded, it's amazing. And then I'm listening. It's not my time to talk. I'm listening. And then they go there, Mena, and they say, nothing is happening. Somebody said this to me. I can't even tell you where because it's such a big organization. She said, we have this amazing document. She said, the leaders are speaking up and they say, we don't know how to execute it. We don't know what to do with it. So they've gotten good consultants to do the equity audit, tell them what's missing, tell them what they need to do, and then you give them the document and nobody know what to do with it. So this is what the joke and why I'm smiling. So someone who has no intention of talking about racism and who believes that these people shouldn't even be here. And, you know, I heard somebody use a phrase the other day that I am still unpacking. It was used about 2 weeks ago in my presence, Mena, and I'm still unpacking because I am still unpacking. We're talking about the 250 million. A conversation was happening, a couple people were in there, and the person said, we have to understand history and land and how people, you know, took over colonization. He said the First Nations people of Canada, they fought for the land and they lost. That's what he said. He said they fought for the land and they lost. And that was the end of the story for him. And we had a long discussion afterward, but I could not get over that. And I could not get over the people who said certain things. And I kept, and of course, I made my statement and I said, this is why I will not stop going to the heart of change. Because we have, get ready for what I'm going to say, we have racist people doing the work of anti-Black racism. We have, and I'm going to tell you why, because it's their position, it's their title. You know, many of us, I'm sure many of you are leaders in the room. You have given, especially like men and those persons, you have gotten your 10th superintendent or whoever, you say, here's our equity plan. Here, everybody go do this plan. We haven't even asked them who they are. We have not asked them where are they on this. We have not even taken a minute to say, hey, where are you, superintendent? Where are you on this where are you? So we're having people in the fear zone who are leading the equity work. Think about that for a minute, Sherry, if you understand the balance or the imbalance of that kind of equation. And that is why I'm smiling, because more and more I see people coming to me and they're saying, okay, I understand it now. The heart, the willingness, the individual is important. Absolutely. The change is going to come from you and I. Look around you and look at the teachers and the partners and the colleagues you have who is doing the work. It's an invested work. It's where your heart is invested. It's where you have an awareness of others. It's where you see racialized kids as possible. It's where you question, why are these kids not there? It's where the teacher walk in the staff meeting and say, do you realize the same 20 kids are always in gifted? Do you realize that we need to do something? It is you have to do that. The paper cannot do that. I've seen people waiting for the paper to do something. And I'm not joking, I'm trying to be funny. I see them waiting for the paper to do something and I go, the paper can't do it. You are the one who's going to lead that. I went to a school once. I walked into a school once, I will never forget. It's right here in Toronto. And the school was about 70% Asian students. Never seen a school with so many Asian students. I was there. I worked there for 4 months. One of the best experience. Love the school. Love it. It's amazing. Teacher, principal, love her. Still talk to her today. And when I looked around, I was an LTO for 4 months. When I looked around on the wall, the pictures of a teacher on the wall, I kept seeing so many Asian teachers. And I go, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And I asked about it. And the principal was new. And she said, oh, you best believe that was intentional. You best believe that was some work. And intentional work put in that. You can't have a school with 70%, and a big school, by the way, with 70% Asian kids from China, from Vietnam, from Korea. It's a beautiful school. And none of them have teachers that look like them. We have to change those. I was in a school, and that's one school. In the same year, I went to a school in Scarborough to do teaching practicum supervision. I walk into a school where the one class I was in had 6 hijab-wearing Muslim girls. One class, a grade 5 class, one. And I looked at the school and it was filled. And it's on my Facebook. I made this post maybe 2.5 years ago. So if you search my social media, you'll find it. I said I'm at a school today and I see so many hijab-wearing girls walking up and down the school. And all I'm looking for is a teacher or one person as an adult who is hijab-wearing. I saw none. So how are those black Muslim girls, hijab-wearing Muslim girls, how will they attain and aspire when there are no role models in the school? How do you think about it if you're a leader in the room? How do you have a school with so many hijab-wearing children? And you have absolutely not one member of staff who looks like them. That for me is ridiculous. We have to change that. And we have to be intentional about that. We have to be intentional. How did one principal get to hire so many teachers at its school? And what's going on here? It's about your leadership. And that's why I'm going to go a little bit strong on you on Monday. Don't miss it. About the moral courage to lead. You have to do the change. And it's heavy lifting. People talk about you. People are going to say, well, what is she doing now? But that's change. We never like change. We like the regular way. We like the okay way. But it's okay for me and it's okay for you. But other persons are suffering. So how do we have an awareness of others? And I love the second one there. Look at the second one. Be aware how these patterns can show up covertly in their communities. Be aware about how these patterns of racism, how they show up. Are we aware? I did a workshop with Queen's University the other day, a series of workshops, and they asked me in an article to describe the students, and I said one thing that I liked, and I would always say they were tuned in. Tuned in. You have to be tuned in. Thank you for that comment, Kim Claremont. As a teacher, we need to bring into our classroom parents, aunts, uncles that represent our students and have those adults engage in learning so our students can see themselves in learning. Absolutely. That's another way to do it. Absolutely. An amazing superintendent, she asked me some questions. We were having a coffee talk the other day about, because I did some major work with her. And I said, she was talking about next year. And I said, each school, and I'm going to share what I said with her right now, Mena, so you get it. Each school, the board has its equity plan here. I don't know you divide the work, but I don't know what is on the board. I don't know what's in the middle, but every single school should have their work plan or their action plan. Need to be no more than that. Anybody remember used to do the SIT plan and this kind of plan? A simple plan to say, here what we are going to achieve for this year. And it don't need to be 50 things. It need to be maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8 things. It don't need to be 50, because you and I know we are not going to get 50 things done. But be honest about those things. And you know what I said to her? One of the major things that I would do if I was a principal is how I make strong connections to the community. And I'm not doing that on parents' night only. I am having a welcome back to school even for my parents. I mean, I'm saying that as if I'm a principal, but I'm not. But that's what I would want. A welcome back to school even for the parents. That's different from my curriculum night. My Christmas program is not going to be just a show and a performance and the kids go home. I want to make sure that parents are engaged. Maybe it's at 4 o'clock. They come early to see some display or art or something. Maybe it's a coffee and donut and conversation even. You have to find intentional ways that you never did before in connecting to the parents and the communities. It has to be done better. It has to be done. I used to know all my parents because I used to invite my parents into my classroom when it wasn't popular and wasn't regular, just to see my artwork, just to see what we are doing. So I want you to have an awareness of self. That's what we're going to do to grow, and awareness of others. That's why I said from awareness to action. Take a note of it. Awareness of self, awareness of others. And then I want to show you this. I really want to get to this. So this came from a study being done here in Ontario. Good one by, we call it Youth Rex. And I can share this document with you if you want. Youth Rex. These are the voices. This is 2017. These are the voices of thousands of students. Thousands of students. And they interviewed communities and they came up with the 10 things that they're saying. This is 2017. We have the Stephen Lewis Report in 1992. We have things in between. We have the Pendulum. We have the Toronto one. We have the Rise. There's so many documents, and I'm sure you have your own document. If not, I'm sure you're going to get one soon, because people want to see what you're doing and want to hear the statistics and the data from our students. And you should gather those kind of conversations. So these are the voices. And the students are saying, hey, these are what they're saying. Widespread anti-Black racism. Black excellence not recognized. I did this for a reason, to show you 2017. This is not a George Floyd excitement paperwork. This is not, oh, George Floyd, so let us see what's going on with our Black students. This is 2017. Before this, it is the Stephen Lewis Report. It is the Pendulum done by in Durham region. It is a Rise done by in the Peel region. There's so many documents that I have seen and found that is saying the same thing. Look at number 3, lack of representation. Look at number 4. Anti-Black racism in educational system, child welfare. I can tell you, because I'm sitting on the board of a child welfare, of Durham child, there is a lot of work being done in child welfare. They have opened up and honest about all the apprehension and all kind of stuff that is done in racialized community. Thank you, Jolly, for sharing that. Powerful. Powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Mental health is not new. Look at number 9. It's not new. I want us to get that. So as we wrap up to a close, I want you to understand this. Why I want to carve out this conversation. The awareness starts with you. The awareness starts with you. The awareness begins with you. I didn't say go read a newspaper and go find what happened to the man next door. I said start with you. What am I feeling? When I see this on TV, how do I react? Is it empathy that I'm showing? Or I'm like, yeah, here we go again, another Black person killed. Yeah, they're Black people always doing all kind of things. What is your reaction? And you're by yourself. Ask yourself why you react the way you did. Then you must have an awareness of others. What about your Black colleagues, your racialized colleagues? I was on a panel, I keep on telling you, and I say we have to develop relationships with each other. You can't just call on a First Nation person when it's Orange T-shirt day to come say a poem and knock a drum. It's wrong. Stop it. You have to develop relationships with them. Then guess what? When it's time for you to ask them to do something, it's like second nature. You have to build relationships. And you have to see colors. See people. See color. When you see color, you see all the things that affect us. When you see color, you see all the things that our people are threatened by. I think I've done maybe some amazing work. It seems I've gotten so much feedback about how I talk about accent. I have had big men. You'd be surprised. I have had a guy who is a manager wrote me an email, emotional, saying, Dr. Campbell, I listened to you and how you talk about accent, and you went into your Jamaican accent, and he said, you brought tears to my eyes. He said, I am from Guyana, and he said, I never use my own accent at work, because if I do, I feel like I will not be respected and appreciated. This is textbook. People tell you that. This is standard. Who allows people with accent to feel less than? You do it. You are the one listening to me. I do. We're the one who are doing these things. We're the one who said, I don't want to see you. I don't want to see your accent. I don't want to see your color. I don't want to see your hijab. I don't want to see your turban. I don't want to see your smoke. I don't want to see your incense. I don't want to see your smudging. I don't want to see nothing like that. Ask yourself why we're doing that. So we talked about this already. We said Black Lives Matter. And we said why? Because of the urgency, because of the issues our students are facing, because of the tons of stuff that we have listed on and on, the streaming, the disproportionate number of students who are suspended, Black students. These are what statistics, not Andrew Campbell saying it. This is what the data has said. It said the prison, just the school to prison pipeline, the number of our Black boys who are suspended, the over number of us, the underrepresentation of our Black students in gifted programs, but the overrepresentation in ESL and certain special education programs, the streaming, the lack of them in Toronto. TDSB did a whole thing on who is in the special schools, the art schools, and they show you how it's filled with privileged kids and how they get in. And right now they need to disrupt. They need to disrupt admission practices. And just so you know, it's happening everywhere, including the universities. If I had time, I would tell you more about a study that was done. So in America the other day, a big thing about students who did not get in because they gave these exams and now they put away the exams. Not that they didn't get the exam, they put away certain barriers, they move away certain barriers, and they said they have never had so many applications and so many successful applications. Because we can tell you that sometimes to get into certain institutions and spaces, the barriers are in the application and the admission processes. Ask yourself, do we need all of this? Ask yourself that question. And that's one of the ways people are disrupting. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for, I see what you're sharing, Kim. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the resource. So as we close, I want us to come to the place as educators. One of my favorite movies that says, I see you, Avatar. This movie is from Avatar. If you have never watched Avatar, it's a movie I'd recommend you to watch. A beautiful movie. And it shows you that whole idea of what colonization looks like and what we destroy, what we don't understand. We destroy what we think is less than or simple. We destroy, we use words such as hostile and primitive because we don't understand that people have a culture, an identity, a story before you came and before we decided that. So I want you to realize as we wrap up that racism is major. And what I want you to do is to be aware of how it identifies, how it comes out. Because a lot of the things we see them on camera. We talk about the judge. We talk about George Floyd. We talk about, all the debt. We can list a number of debts. I normally would do it and show you. But what about the little things underneath? What about the things that underneath? I personally always say I have done interviews where there are 7 and 8 white people interviewing me, and I'm the only person who is of color, and I'm on the other side. Of course, I'm going to get the letter that I am not the right fit. How could I be the right fit? But somebody on the committee has to say, hey, look at all of us. We keep doing the same thing. We are reproducing sameness because sameness is safe and sameness is what we are used to. And so we keep reproducing sameness. So I want to leave you with this. This is what I'm going to leave you with. White discourse. The white discourse can stem from a sense of shame. This is done by this is by Blaisdell 2018, and he says white discourse can stem from a sense of shame whites feel when confronting the oppressive nature of whiteness. Shame makes us fearful of acknowledging our complicity in racial oppression and can lead us to engage in a prime feature of white discourse, defending our identities as good people rather than examining our complicity in structural racism. I'm going to leave you with that. I want us not to remember that nobody's here to attack you as an individual. That's never the workshop. That's never the talk. That's never the plan. You know, when I tell people a while about calling out, I don't say go find a white person and go call out. I say let's call out systems. Let's go into the staff meeting and say, hey, they're the same 15 kids who are on the team all the time. And the other kids never get a chance. How are we creating? How are we selecting? That's what you call out. How are we selecting participation? That's what I want you to call out. Not go attack one person. We're calling out a system that we are part of that has been complicit. So I want to leave that with us as we wrap up this conversation. And as we're thinking about equity, diversity, inclusion, we're thinking about all the topics. We're thinking about cultural competence. We're thinking about courageous conversation. We're thinking about how do we do the work? How do we do the work in growing cultural competence? How do we do the work of dismantling and disrupting deficit thinking? How do we do the work of engaging in creative great conversation? How do we do the work of cultural relevant and responsive pedagogy? How do we do all of that? We have to be more aware. We have to be more aware, and then we move to action. So I'm going to leave that with us, that we move from awareness to action. We need both. We need the awareness, and then we need to act. We want to act from very informed spaces. We want to act from not a space of fear, but a space of willingness and passion that we want to see change. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of our conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew Campbell.